Hello everyone, this is Swapna here from Magic Paper Pixie. DT for craft angles, I received my DT kit some time back, and with Valentine's Day around the corner, I wanted to show you how to make 3 slightly interactive Valentine Day cards. So let's get started. For my first card, I'll be using the stamp set called You Be Mine and the stencil called Flower Clusters. I'll be using both these products to make this particular card. Now I have made a top folding note card and the card panel both with the Craft Angles cardstock Classic Smooth White 300 GSM. This cardstock is really good for ink blending. For the time being I keep the top folding note card aside while I prep the panel. I tape down the stencil on my craft mat which I usually use for blending inks since I didn't want to get my black mat dirty. Now I would recommend taping down the stencil quite tightly so that the blending process becomes a little easier, otherwise the note card keeps moving. And for blending I use these handy Craft Angles brushes. It's extremely easier to blend with these brushes. In the past I've also used the sponge dabbers, but I find this a little more convenient and easier to blend colors. The 3 distress oxides that I have used are seedless preserves, picked raspberries and abandoned coral. So I do come in with a heavy hand and go lighter towards the side. I did not want to have the same smooth pattern all over, so on certain parts of the note card I've gone a little heavy handed. After the blending is done, I take out my note card carefully, and I love the effect that I've got. But I wanted the panel to be cut into a rectangle so that there's a little bit of a white border left on the note card. So I use my die cut machine and further use a rectangle die to die cut the panel. I wanted to make a window on the front of the panel because my idea was, like you see in the video, get a circle window through which I can see the girl holding the balloons. But on the front panel of the window will only show the balloons, and the girl will be revealed only when you open the note card. So I try to line up all of these together to make sure that the girl is not visible through the window. And so in this process obviously the girl will be a little to the side, and it's stamped perfectly. And when you close the card you can only see the balloons in the girl's hand. I do some basic Copic coloring for the girl. I love the color of her dress and I made some red balloons that the girl is holding. I've also added some shimmer using Wink of Stella. It's a clear shimmer pen on top of the balloons. I also added some glossy accents to give the balloons a little more pop. I decided to heat emboss the sentiment "Someone Loves You" on a small strip of vellum in white and attach it to the top of the panel. I think the sentiment goes very well with how this card opens up. I also added some little sequences and clear water droplets on top of the vellum and the card for added interest. I hope you like this card. For the second card, I decided to take the interactive element a notch higher and decided to make a peekaboo card. For this particular card, the cardstock that I'm using is Caramel Brown 250 GSM cardstock by Craft Angles. In the video I'm showing you the measurements that I've written down. I hope they are visible. If not, I would also be explaining it as I make the card. For a peekaboo card, you typically need 3 pieces of cardstock, 1 each for the front, the inside and the back side. Here I'm using the front side of the cardstock, which measures 4 1/4 by 8 1/4 inches, and I score down the cardstock at 2 3/4 of an inch. I then ensure that the cards are folded properly by using my Teflon bone folder over it. This is the front panel of the card. I then take the back panel of the card, which measures 4 1/4 inches by 5 3/4 of an inch, and score it down at 5 1/4 inches. Basically, you have to score the back panel of the card at 1/4 of an inch. If you're holding the card the way I did, then of course you'll score it at 5 1/4 of an inch. I use my Teflon bone folder to make sure that the crease is properly folded. So now we have the front and the back side of the card. And the middle part of the card needs to be folded exactly into half. So now the middle part of the card measures 4 1/4 by 8.5 inches. So we will crease it, or score it rather, at 4 1/4 inches, which is exactly half of the length of the card. So now the card is folded in half. This part will be the middle part of our card. Now to assemble this card, it's really simple. There's nothing very complicated, and we have to see where the peekaboo element of this card is. So I'm planning to use a heart-shaped die cut on the front panel of the card and the middle panel of the card, through which we'll have a peekaboo element. So I die cut the front panel of the card. Now I have to make sure that the middle part of the card lines up perfectly with the front panel of the card, and I die cut it in exactly the same place where I have die cut the front panel of the card with the heart. So I line it up just to ensure that I do not die cut it at a different place or it's not misaligned. I use a pencil and mark where I need to die cut the middle part of the cardstock. Just to be sure, I use the die again and lined it up to make sure that my die cut doesn't move around. This does take a lot of time, but I just wanted to be very sure that the die cuts are aligned properly, otherwise the peekaboo elements will not really come through for the card. So once I die cut the middle part of the card, since it was a folded note card and had two cardstocks, the second part of the cardstock didn't cut properly, and I ran it again through my die cutting machine. And once I got the desired result, I began assembling my card. To assemble the card, so I will hold the back side panel of the card and keeping the score towards the right hand side, towards my right hand side of the card, tape it down to the middle part of the card. Here I use a tacky tape to ensure that this card fits properly on top of the middle part of the note card. I adhere the middle part of the note card to the back side of the panel. And reinforce it just to make sure it doesn't come apart. Now the front side of the panel, the little flap that you see needs to be tucked in behind the middle part of the note card. This part should be able to move freely. So we need to ensure the front part and the middle part of the panel are perfectly aligned. This is why we struggle in the beginning to make sure the die cuts are exactly in the same place. Otherwise, the card will be totally misaligned. So what I did is I used a liquid glue, because I usually do worry a little with a tape when it comes to moving things around. Once it's stuck, it's a little difficult to move the card around. The liquid glue gives you is a little more flexible with margin of errors. So I used a liquid glue and pasted the front panel to the middle panel. And now I went on to create the other elements of the card. The other elements of the cards are relatively simple. I stamped the little girl from the Will You Be Mine stamp set by Craftangles and colored it with different colors this time using Copic markers. I like the lime green color, so I decided to give her dress a lime green color and change the colors of the balloons to multicolored instead of keeping it red again. I then fussy cut the image of the girl. This image will go in front of the card. I thought the front of the panel, the cardstock, looked too plain, so I decided to use the overlapping stencils by Craftangles with some antique linen distress oxide and give it a little bit of a visual texture just to break the monotony. I use the Craftangles blending brushes and lightly go across with the distress oxide inks across the front of the panel. I realized I left a line around the panel while stenciling, and I later corrected it off camera, and I think now the panel looks okay. I try to see if the image of the girl looks good on the panel. And I like how the image goes with the cardstock, so I go ahead and stick the image to the front of the panel. Now to complete the peekaboo element, I use two white cardstock die cut in the shape of a heart, which are slightly larger than the size of the window. For this card, I wanted the sentiments to be the peekaboo element, so I used the sentiment "All of me loves all of you" from the stamp set "Will You Be Mine." Now I wanted "all of me" to be on the front of the card, and when the card opens, the sentiment to be "loves all of you." So I didn't have the heart to cut my stamp into two, so I masked the words that I didn't want to be seen with the washi tape, inked it over, and removed the washi tape, and then stamped the image on the heart. So this is how I got the two hearts, which says separately "All of me loves all of you." Now since I wanted the sentiment "All of me" to be visible when the card is closed, I will adhere this to the back panel of the cardstock which is right at the back. You can check this by closing the card and see if it's visible. Here also I adhered the sentiment with liquid glue so that I can just move it around to make sure that it is positioned correctly. Now when you open the card, the middle flap which was tucked in comes out. That is where I stuck the sentiment "Loves all of you." And this card now looks like a perfect peekaboo card which says "All of me," and when you open it, it says "All of you." I also punched out some hearts and some sequences just to give it an added effect. I hope you like this peekaboo card. For my third card, I decided to make a simple shaker card using the overlapping circle stencils from Craftangle. I used that with the cardstock and a hard die I found in my stash. These inks are have been a part of my stash for some time, and I haven't really used them much, so I decided to bring them out for this card. The colors that I used are have more of a fluorescent tinge, and I love the effect that I got on this card. I used the heart die and cut a heart shaped in front of the panel to make a shaker card. I really love the colors, and I decided to keep this die cut for another card someday. I used this card and used the transparencies by Craftangles, which is 100 GSM. I cut into a smaller size and pasted on the back side of the panel and adhere it with some tacky tape. Once the transparency is adhered properly, I try and find sequences which will go with this card and decided to watercolor the panel of the see-through window behind with some mild colors. I added the sequence after using some anti-static powder, double taped the back panel of the card and adhered it to the panel. I then thought a touch of gold would look good with this card, and hence decided to stick the panel to the gold cardstock so that thin edges are visible before adhering it to a caramel brown note card. I then decided to stamp the sentiment "You're always on my mind" on a black cardstock and white heat embossed it and stuck it to the front of the panel. I added a little bit of sequences just to give it an extra shimmer. I hope you like these cards, and I hope you like my take on Valentine's card. Thank you for watching this video. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Until later, take care, stay safe, and happy crafting.